Lessons with Marcel did this video about how Billy Strings entering the mainstream of bluegrass music. He related it to several other sort of catalysts in recent years,
Hmm.
or there was a long list, but in recent years, that kind of changed how people viewed this genre, got
Yeah.
people, or made it into a wider audience. And he mentioned the "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" soundtrack
Hmm.
and both Wagon Wheels from
Hmm.
Darius Rucker and Old Crow
Yeah.
that sort of reignited this bluegrass flame.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely true. And that happens. We're talking about that happening in bluegrass music because that's what we kind of both do now. But that happens in a lot of genres. John Mayer did that for blues, right?
Yeah,
Especially kind of like 20
that's true.
15 years ago. Um, that got. I mean, essentially, he got the millennial generation into blues. And
Right.
even before that, man, in the early 2000s, man, when I was in eighth grade, I remember when Eminem's "The Marshall Mathers" LP came
Yeah,
out. That got a bunch of white kids into rap, like rural white kids into rap.
that's
And
true.
even with bluegrass, I think another important one with bluegrass, especially in the '90s, is when Ricky Skaggs started doing like traditional bluegrass. Because
Hmm.
Ricky was a huge country star through the '80s and like the early '90s. And then when he,
Right.
he switched over and was doing straight up, traditional bluegrass, and that was being featured on, you remember TNN, you remember the Nashville Network? And
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
oh
yeah.
yeah. So that was huge back in the day. And I think he was getting stuff played on CMT. I bought his Bluegrass Rules album, which is
Uh-huh.
just a traditional bluegrass record at Walmart. So
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that was so that was another big one. But yeah, man, I absolutely think that's true. And the thing about Billy, man, to the best of my knowledge, I don't know of anybody else that's taken a bluegrass band and had somebody who's leading with like flat picking guitar that's pulled the kind of crowds that he pulls. So I mean, dude, to the best of my understanding, he has gotten more people into this style of music and into this style of guitar playing than anyone else ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh yeah, I would say that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen him play live? Have you been to a live show?
Mm-mm. No.
I've been to two,
Uh huh.
and yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah.
These weren't like arenas, but they were like hockey stadiums, like
Yeah.
kind of Civic Center in Knoxville, and then the
Yeah.
place in Asheville or some.
Yeah. Sure.
And yeah, it's wild. It's absolutely mad. And to see, and this kind of segues, I want to introduce you. This is Aaron Jackson, um, amazing guitar player,
Oh,
amazing
thank you,
musician,
baby.
but also a good friend of mine.
Yes, sir.
And we know each other from meeting a long time ago.
Long
I
time
have
ago. Yeah.
2007, 2008
Hmm. Yeah.
in Johnson City,
Yeah.
Tennessee,
That's right.
where we,
That's how we
yeah,
know each other.
right. That's how we know each other.
Yeah.
And so getting back to like the bluegrass thing, it's weird to be in that big of a crowd, because like I'm thinking back when I was learning the style of music, and even like to this, recent years, when
Hmm.
you go to a bluegrass show and you'd hear these songs that Billy's playing live,
Hmm.
like it's usually like 25 people in lawn chairs for the most part. And
Hmm.
there's bluegrass festivals and everything, but just a
Right.
show.
Hmm.
And to just kind of see this morph into that is just, it's like, it's pretty wild and
Yeah.
it's cool.
Right.
And I think
Yes.
that definitely is rejuvenating the genre.
It is a net
Makes it,
positive. It is a net
yeah,
positive. I get really sad whenever I'm talking to friends that I have that I've played this music with for years and years and years who um don't necessarily have positive things to say about you know someone like Billy. I think that's really sad because
yeah.
it's a net positive. It's gotten so many more people into this kind of music, which is great for everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
I think like that's the irony. And then Marcel, like this is a thought of his in his videos, same one I'm referencing, we'll put it down below. But like he's speaking of, as a bluegrass fan, you want more people into the genre.
100%.
But then when something like Billy comes along, yeah, there's some negative,
Oh yeah,
reactions to it and like long
sure.
lasting sort of resentment. It is interesting. I think it's an interesting thing to sit
Yeah.
back and sort of watch,
Uh-huh.
read the comments and everything.
Oh
And
gosh, man. Yeah.
and this, that, and the other. So I have, and I've never like talked about this out loud, but I want to speak on the topic of John Mayer,
Yeah.
Billy Strings,
Yeah.
and where the two sort of fit. And you might not be a fan. I'm not sure. I feel like I remember conversations with you about the Grateful Dead, right?
Okay.
What
Yeah.
I see is something strange. So like the Grateful Dead, Dead and Company sort of
Hmm.
rejuvenated the band. I forget how many ever years ago. John
Hmm.
Mayer in the driver's seat to sort of
Sure.
replace, if you will, Jerry Garcia,
Hmm.
which I think was more of like a publicity sort of angle to it. I don't know. Like John Mayer's an amazing guitar player, but it
Hmm.
was an interesting pick.
Yeah.
What I find interesting about all this now is that the like obviously they still have a following, but it seems like in my way of looking at it, that sort of throne was like what not that sort of like Jerry Garcia pass down has kind of been given to Billy
Hmm.
over John Mayer. And I
Yeah.
feel because like the following is interesting and
Sure.
then you're sort of having like a Deadhead type show. I don't know. I've actually never seen Dead and Company, but do you have any
Yeah.
thoughts on that? Because I've never voiced that out
Yeah.
loud.
No, man, I think that's a very interesting take on that. I hadn't really thought about those two kind of in the same sentence like that. But I mean, that makes sense. That
Yeah.
that totally makes sense. And no, dude, I'm a huge John Mayer fan, dude. Seriously, because that was like one of the things because back when I was in college, that was like it was like John Mayer and maybe a little bit of Dave Matthews Band, and that was like normal music that I could play for regular people, girls, at
Yeah.
parties and stuff. That they're like, oh
Right.
yeah, we know that, it's great, and it also was just, I mean, it was just really good music. I mean, Dave Matthews is a great guitar player. John Mayer is a
Yeah.
fantastic guitar player. But no, man, I think
Yeah.
that's a very interesting take that you've got on that. And the interesting thing about the Grateful Dead, though, is, and it's weird. They're almost like strange bedfellows here, but it's like the Grateful Dead always had a bluegrass element to it because
Yeah.
Jerry Garcia is a bluegrass picker. He's a
Yeah.
he was a like really
Yep.
solid bluegrass banjo player. I
Right.
think he
Right.
was a
Right.
great bluegrass guitar player.
Hmm.
So there has always been this kind of like a little bit of a bluegrass influence in the Grateful Dead thing, and
Yeah.
Fish kept that going because they would have a part in
Right.
their set where they would stop and do like a bluegrass set. So it's sometimes it's weird to see all these things come together, but yeah, there's always been a little bit of a bluegrass influence on the whole jam band scene. That's always been there.
Yeah. That's true. I guess like that's been a recent sort of revelation of mine.
Hmm.
I would say that like my interest in the Dead, 4 or 5 years ago, it kind of peaked, and that
Hmm.
sort of it expanded a lot of circles for me, I guess.
Yeah.
Let me pull out my notes here. Big
So yeah,
production
sure, dude.
value on our so like how did you get into playing? You're from Texas,
Yeah, originally.
and
Hmm.
yeah, and I think that's like your musical roots run in Texas. Am I
Well,
correct in remembering that?
here's the thing, man. When I tell people that I'm a guitar player from Texas, most people most people are like, "Oh, so like you grew up playing in blues clubs in Austin," or they think it's like, "Oh, did you grow up like playing in like Western swing dance halls outside of Fort Worth?" It was none of that. None of that. I mean, it just, man, I come from a really small town, and my family are great people, but they're not really music people. I
Mm,
mean, they're just not. I mean, they liked, my parents grew up in the 70s, so they liked, the Eagles and Queen and CCR. Kind of, they didn't listen to them a whole lot. They weren't like diehard fans, but I'd hear that, you know. So the musical influences that I had came to me not so much through like the geographical location, of like where I was, but it was just, things that I heard on the radio. Because, okay, I'm a kid growing up in East Texas in the 1990s, and it wasn't only the case for East Texas. But if you're growing up in the 1990s, you are going to, especially in East Texas, you're going to hear 90s country. Period. Even if you don't like it, you're going to hear it. Whenever you
hmm.
walk into any public place, you're going to hear Alan Jackson, you're going to hear Joe Diffie, you're going to hear Randy Travis, you're going
Oh
to
yeah.
hear Reba McEntire. And if
Yep.
you're hearing that, now this is where it comes around as a guitar player. if you are hearing 90s country, you are hearing Brent Mason.
Hmm.
He wasn't the only guitar player, like the only lead guitar player, but he's on a majority of that stuff. So if you're hearing 90s country, you're hearing Brent Mason. So
Right.
so I always I didn't know it was Brent Mason at the time, but I grew up hearing a lot of that stuff. But also, man, a big part of my musical influences came from the guy that I took guitar lessons from. And his name was John DeFore. And man, he taught guitar in this this like old hotel in Mineola, Texas, and I'd go there every week. And man, he just turned like it was crazy because I started off there as a beginner, but
Hmm.
as you know, as time went on and I really started to develop a love for the instrument, I'd just go in and every week he'd be like, "Listen to this," and it'd be Django Reinhardt. And the next week I'd come in, he's like, "Dude, you got to listen to this," and it'd be like Mark Knopfler. And then I'd
Yeah.
come in next week and he'd show me this VHS of like Joe Pass playing solo jazz guitar. So I just got exposed to a lot of different players. And then one week I came in and he said, "Dude, watch this." And he had recorded on VHS on video Ricky Skaggs from TNN, and I don't remember what they were doing. It was like Get Up John or Rawhide. And he's like, "Watch this guitar solo," and it was Brian Sutton. And then
Mm, okay.
I saw that and I was just like, "Oh, I suck." I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
"Oh my god, I had never heard anybody play an acoustic guitar." That was really the first time I'd really heard like flat picking, which
Yeah.
is totally intimidating. I wish it would have been
Yeah.
somebody else that I heard first besides that.
Right.
But I kind of fell in love with it, and that was where I kind of really started to get into bluegrass. But it wasn't because I grew up hearing bluegrass being played in my house. I just had a really cool and really eclectic guitar teacher who liked a lot of different stuff, and he turned me on to a bunch of different players. And that's really where, and that's why even today, man, I like playing a lot of different styles. I just do. I love blues, I love rock, I love fingerstyle, I love chicken picking, I love bluegrass. I just like playing a lot of different styles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what you just said, and like I think this is true, is definitely true to me, probably true to people watching that are
Hmm.
getting into the style of music. Because when you watch that video, how old was he, by the way? Not to,
How old
wa-
was?
was he in that video? Because I know I've seen some
Oh,
clips of him
probably
being,
like 24, 25.
okay, okay.
Oh
But
yeah. Yeah, he was a young buck.
so okay, so what would you say to somebody that's like, wanting to get into the genre? Maybe
Hmm.
like I think I have a unproved like thesis that
Hmm.
um there's an element of like unplugging and just picking up a guitar and not being connected digitally, and that's what is maybe driving some of the interest. I cannot prove it, but for somebody
Hmm.
that's sitting there, thinking they want to get into the genre for maybe that reason, or just because, they're a fan of it or what have you, what's a like a misconception, or I mean, what's a misconception, or like, or some tips and tricks or what have you,
Yeah,
or
sure, sure.
anything for a beginner, basically.
Right. I mean, you're talking about somebody that's getting into it like as a guitar player.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I think the number one, and I had just alluded to it a minute ago, that if you're not this like devastating shredder, that you can't play this stuff. It's not true. It's not true,
Hmm.
man. And I've spent a lot of time because teaching guitar has been my main gig since 2006. And man, dude,
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
just had lots of students over the years, man, where I'll just, and thank God for the arrival of the Strum Machine app. Oh my gosh.
yeah,
Here, you can see the gray in my beard. So here's my old man rant. I wish I would have had that, when I was growing up. That would have been great.
yeah.
But I mean, man, I can't tell you how many times I've just kind of helped students, do fiddle tunes or, maybe other solos, but fiddle tunes work particularly well at 35 beats per minute, 40 beats per
Right.
minute, 45 beats per minute, as slow as we need to get it to where they can play that. They can play it in time. They can play that along with a backing track, and it starts to feel like music. And if you need to start right there, that is fantastic. Start there. Start there. Get this stuff down. Develop a repertoire of tunes. You can kind of build up the speed. But I
Mm.
think one of the misconceptions is that you have to be able to shred like Brian Sutton or Billy Strings or Tony Rice or somebody like that in order to be able to play and enjoy this music, and that's absolutely not true.
Yeah. And I always think of certain licks, which when you sort of learn the fundamentals of it, it becomes quite easy. It covers what I like to call a lot of musical real estate, is like a little bit sounds really, really cool. Like,
Yeah.
and it just is a lot of fun to play.
Hmm.
And for me, like learning that tidbit of, that little lick, I don't know. And like there's just this uppityness to this music that just
Hmm.
makes people dance the way they do, or,
Sure.
clogging this, that. And when you start finding those spaces on the guitar neck, that's a great feeling. It's an amazing
Yes.
feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree. I totally agree with that.
So tell us about some of your original music, because
Yeah.
you've said you're not just a flat picker.
Mm-mm.
You've got a whole library of music on
Hmm.
Spotify. Hopefully,
Yeah.
I'm not
Sure.
too far from the mic.
No, you're good.
Spotify and everywhere else. So
Hmm.
and we've played together in a band. We haven't
Oh yeah.
mentioned that.
Yeah. 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 Uh-huh.
You and I were in a band. I hated this band name. I still do to this day. The Twang Bangers.
It
Um,
was
yeah, the
fun.
Twang Bangers. I was the only one to vote against that. If I remember correctly.
Really.
I don't think you were in on that,
Uh,
but anyway, but yeah, we go far back. We
hmm.
played tons of shows for a couple years in
Hmm.
East Tennessee.
Yeah.
And we started what I remember we recorded some demos or whatever
We
those were
did.
that ended up
Yeah.
going on some of your albums. So
Hmm.
tell us
Yeah.
all about that.
Yeah, man. So that was that was a good time, man. I had a lot of fun playing in that band. Um, and that was like you said, that was like around 2008. So like really before that, man. And you had alluded to this a minute ago, but I had from 2002 to about 2008, the only music I played was bluegrass, was like traditional bluegrass, and we'd be playing at a lot of festivals and other places like that, where a lot of times, I mean, it's like 25 people in lawn chairs, and I mean that's kind of it. And the typical age was usually like 60 and above,
Hmm.
which is great. I mean, that's just what those people loved, that music. And and I was playing with the ETSU Bluegrass Band, and I had a couple of other bands that I played with. But then whenever we started that band, then we're playing in bars every single night, and it's rowdy and it's loud, and everybody's like kind of like a college age thing. So it was just a completely different scene. So
Yeah.
it was a good change for me that I needed at the time. Now I I eventually took certain elements of that lifestyle way too far. It just is what it is. But no, that was a good time, and it was cool to be able to kind of lean over and jump into the like country guitar stuff. We played some rock and roll too, and it was a good time, man. I had a really good time playing in that band, especially in those like those first couple of years like that. That was fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, do people know you're a drummer?
I don't think so.
Well,
But
now
I
they
can't
do.
say that I can't say that I am, because I really don't know what it would sound like if I got behind a set now. But that's what I started out on. Yeah, I think 12 or 13.
Yeah.
So I was a drummer up until about the time that band disbanded.
Hmm.
I think the last time I played a gig was 2014. I was thinking about that earlier.
Yeah.
So it's been a decade, and yeah, man, I don't miss the drums. I don't
Okay.
miss being the first guy there with all of his crap and the
Ooh,
last guy to leave with all of his crap. That was always
that's a
a
that's a
thing.
lot to carry from point A to point B, man. Yeah.
But you know what? I've got a gig this afternoon, and when it comes to playing solo, like for what I do, it's about the same amount of crap, you know?
Oh, sure.
I was
Yeah.
just thinking about that. But
Yeah. Cool, man.
anyway, but yeah, those were good times.
That was fun.
Yeah, played in Nashville.
Hmm.
I was out there about a month ago at Tootsie's.
Yeah.
Played back in the back room, I remember, and
Oh, yeah.
yeah, yeah, that was yeah, that was
That was
interesting.
a fun trip.
So but your music in general,
Yeah, sure.
yeah. So what would you describe it as? And we can find them on put the links below on
Yeah,
Spotify and
sure.
everything else.
Yeah.
But how do you yeah, tell us about your genre, or like sort
Right.
of
So
what
so
it
so
is.
again, man, from like 2002 to 2008, basically all I played was like traditional bluegrass. And for a lot of that, I wasn't even playing guitar. I was mostly playing mandolin.
Hmm.
So I was playing guitar too, but I was playing a lot of mandolin. And then that band kind of came along, and then I think I was in that band for maybe like the first year, and then I was out of it, and then I rejoined. So that's kind of what I did from 2008 to around 2012. Then around 2012, I started doing my own music, and I mean honestly, if I it's not it's probably like kind of Tom Petty style rock.
Yeah.
There's a lot of loud, guitars and a lot of organ. I think I've got organ on all of the songs because I just like that sound. So it's kind of
Hmm.
like very Americana flavored rock and roll. Um, and I had just kind of I did that really. I mean, as far as my musical endeavors, that was my main one from probably 2012 to 2019. Off and on. And I think on Spotify, I think I've got a full length album, two EPs, and a handful of singles. And
Hmm.
then that's kind of what I did. And I remember fall of 2019 was starting to get some momentum. We were playing locally and
Hmm.
and regionally as well, and we're starting to draw some crowds, and it was good. And I remember, like a lot of people, I was like, man, 2020 is going to be our year for live music.
Yeah.
Like it was for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then that just kind of that kind of got shut down. And then I just kind of started taking online content a lot more seriously,
Right.
and then I've just kind of shifted into what I'm doing now.
Yeah, and that's a great self segue to the next sort of last point here. And
Yeah,
so
sure.
you teach guitar much like I do. I would say that your content is more advanced flat picking than mine. I'm sort of gearing towards like beginner, still trying to find my
Hmm.
way through it. But yeah, it's really, really impressive stuff. The clip that you saw at the beginning, clips of Dover,
Hmm.
which we should talk about as well.
Yeah, sure.
But check all this out, guys. I'll put the link in the description. You've got some courses and you've got
Hmm.
some music and everything else.
Hmm.
But Cliffs of Dover,
Hmm.
how did that come about? And like,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
was that experience like? And recording that and everything else, because it's
Yeah.
the recording's done very well as well.
Thank you, bud. Well, yeah, I wish I had a better story for it. Like
Mhm.
literally, well, maybe there's a lesson to extrapolate out of this. But it was last year sometime. Our washing machine died, and I had to go wash my clothes at the laundromat. And I was standing in the laundromat, bored, without my phone, and I just had a thought. I should try to do a bluegrass version of Cliffs of Dover. End of story.
That's
I mean,
it.
it's not the end of the story, but I mean, literally, I was just standing bored in a laundromat without my phone, and I was like, huh, should maybe try and do a bluegrass version of Cliffs of Dover. But then I remembered, I was like, don't put this off. I was like, don't put this off. So I went home that evening and I recorded it on. I didn't sync like audio with video. I just recorded it straight to camera.
Hmm.
And I was like, I guess I'll post this. I was like, I hope people don't hate this. And
Right.
then I posted it on like Instagram and TikTok. And I mean, the next day I woke up and I was like, oh wow, okay. And
Yeah.
then and then I think I posted it on YouTube too. But then I started getting a lot of comments from people, and they're like, dude, this is good, but we need the whole thing. And I was like, oh
Right.
shit. I was like, I want to flesh this whole thing out. So from there, I think 6 weeks, 2 months, kind of all I did was work on that arrangement. And then
Okay.
I just kind of fleshed it out. I'd post a couple more clips on it, but then once I kind of had the whole thing, I went and just went and recorded it, and then did a video with it, and that's it. So
Yeah.
so I don't know. Maybe you can, like I said, extrapolate a little bit of a lesson out of that. But I mean, there's value in being bored
At a laundromat.
at or I mean anywhere. But it's just one of those things, man. I mean, this has become an appendage.
Right.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
And I mean, and it's just like how often do you really find yourself, you know, just being bored without your phone? So I don't know. Maybe there's something to take out of that. But I mean, that's the long and the short of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah. Unplug. Yeah. I mean, I've got to do more of it myself. I'm working on it every day. Yeah.
Me too,
I
man.
the catch 22 is like I'm sitting here talking about how I use the strum machine, but when you've got like the guitar in your hands, like you're using a metronome or whatever
Hmm.
anyway, and it's just yeah, to get the head out of the devices. And you and I both create content, so yeah, it can make you go a little stir crazy.
It can. It can.
All
Yeah.
right, so last question.
Yeah, dude.
Any album that you would recommend to listeners, doesn't have to be bluegrass. Tell us what it would be and a quick spiel why
Do I only
you
get one?
recommend this
Do I
album.
only get one?
You can have two. You can have as many as you'd like, actually. It
As
doesn't
many as I'd
really.
like? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it doesn't have to be for any reason. I mean, just
Just
okay.
because you like it. Yeah. What
Here
albums?
So here's a few. Here's a few. Inevitably, whenever we get off this, I'll be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I left this one out here.
Yeah.
For bluegrass, if you're into bluegrass music and you haven't listened to the album Still Climbing Mountains by Blue Highway, you're missing out.
Okay.
That is a great, great, great bluegrass album. The songwriting is amazing on there. The musicianship is spectacular. The production is amazing. Other flat picking albums that I wish more people knew about: David Greer, Lone Soldier, Panorama, and I've Got the House to Myself. I wish more people who are getting into flat picking knew about David Greer. He's just an absolute genius. I would really recommend checking those out. Another one that I re-listened to the other day that I'd forgotten about is Red on Blonde by Tim O'Brien. Tim was the main guy in that bluegrass band Hot Rise back in the day.
Yeah.
But Red on
Yeah.
Blonde is great because it's him doing like bluegrass versions of Bob Dylan songs. He does Senor, he does Tombstone Blues, he does Subterranean Homesick Blues.
Okay,
But
yeah.
he's doing it all like with a bluegrass band.
Yep.
Definitely worth checking out. I know that's probably like 5 or 6 albums right there.
No, that's perfect.
And then me, just personally, I'm about as big of a Tom Waits fan as you're going to find. And Orphans, Ballers, Brawlers, and Bastards, Mule Variations, Swordfish Trombones, Rain Dogs, all of that kind of good
Yep.
stuff. I absolutely love that. So I know that's definitely not bluegrass. And there's about a million others there that I've forgot, but there's a few off the top of the head.
All right. Well, Aaron Jackson, go check him out. Information's below, and thank you.